The morning mist clung to the rolling hills of Montana like a shroud, and through it, a lone figure emerged at exactly 6:15, just as it had every single day for the past 3 months. Jasper, a weathered German shepherd mixed with eyes that held secrets no animal should carry, positioned himself at the exact same spot along the weathered wooden fence that separated the Henderson Ranch from the vast wilderness beyond. His tail never wagged, his ears never perked. He simply stood there, motionless as a statue, staring into the dense forest with an intensity that made the hairs on the back of anyone's neck stand on end. Tom Henderson had noticed this peculiar behavior from his kitchen window while sipping his morning coffee. But what started as mild curiosity had slowly transformed into something far more unsettling. The dog wasn't his. Jasper had simply appeared one foggy morning, wandering onto the property with no collar, no identification, and no explanation. Tom had called the local shelters, posted notices around the small town of Millbrook, even reached out to neighboring ranches, but no one claimed the mysterious canine. After weeks of searching, Tom had reluctantly accepted Jasper as part of his daily routine, though something about the animal's behavior continued to gnaw at him like a splinter under the skin. What truly disturbed Tom wasn't just the dog's unwavering morning ritual, but the complete absence of any other normal dog behavior. Jasper never barked at the cattle, never chased the chickens that roamed freely around the farmyard, never even acknowledged Tom's presence unless food was involved. The animal seemed to exist for one purpose only: to maintain his silent vigil at that specific section of fence, as if he were waiting for something or someone that never came. The local veterinarian, Dr. Sarah Mitchell, had examined Jasper thoroughly and declared him physically healthy, though she admitted there was something in the dog's demeanor that left her feeling profoundly uneasy. That autumn painted the Montana landscape in brilliant shades of gold and crimson. Tom found himself watching Jasper more intently, trying to decode the mystery that had taken up residence on his property. The rancher was a practical man, someone who believed in tangible explanations for observable phenomena. But Jasper's behavior defied every logical framework he could construct. The dog's positioning was too precise, too deliberate, too consistent to be mere coincidence or simple animal instinct. There was purpose behind those dark eyes, an intelligence that seemed almost human in its complexity and determination. The first real clue emerged during a conversation with Martha Delacroix, the elderly woman who ran the general store in downtown Millbrook and served as the unofficial keeper of local history and gossip. When Tom mentioned his mysterious canine visitor, Martha's face drained of color so rapidly that he thought she might faint. After several moments of uncomfortable silence, she revealed that a dog matching Jasper's exact description had belonged to the Clearwater family, who had lived in a cabin deep in the forest beyond Tom's property line. The Clearwaters, a young couple named Daniel and Rebecca, along with their 8-year-old daughter Emma, had vanished without a trace exactly 7 months ago, leaving behind only questions and a community shrouded in speculation and fear. The disappearance of the Clearwater family had sent shockwaves through the tight-knit community of Millbrook, where everyone knew everyone else's business and strangers were noticed immediately. Daniel Clearwater had been a wildlife photographer, spending days and sometimes weeks in the wilderness capturing images of Montana's natural beauty, while Rebecca worked as a freelance graphic designer from their remote cabin. Emma had been a bright, curious child who loved exploring the forest with her father and had an uncanny ability to communicate with animals. The family had seemed perfectly content with their isolated lifestyle, which made their sudden disappearance all the more baffling and disturbing. Sheriff Robert Kane had conducted an extensive investigation, utilizing search and rescue teams, helicopters, and even bringing in specialists from the state police. But they had found absolutely nothing. No signs of struggle, no abandoned vehicles, no personal belongings, no trail to follow. The cabin had been left exactly as if the family had simply stepped out for a brief walk and planned to return within minutes. Dinner dishes were still in the sink, Emma's homework was spread across the kitchen table, and Daniel's expensive camera equipment remained undisturbed in his studio. It was as if the Clearwater family had simply evaporated into the Montana wilderness, leaving behind only questions and a growing sense of dread that permeated the entire community. Tom absorbed this information with a mixture of fascination and growing unease, realizing that Jasper's mysterious behavior might be connected to something far more sinister than he had initially imagined. The dog's unwavering focus on that particular section of forest suddenly took on new significance, transforming from an amusing quirk into a potentially crucial piece of evidence in an unsolved disappearance. That evening, as Tom watched Jasper assume his familiar position at the fence, he noticed something he had somehow missed during all his previous observations. The dog wasn't just staring randomly into the forest, but was focused on a specific point approximately 50 yards beyond the fence line, where a barely visible trail disappeared into the dense undergrowth. The realization that Jasper might be trying to communicate something important prompted Tom to make a decision that would change everything. The next morning, instead of simply observing from his kitchen window, he approached the fence and positioned himself next to the patient dog. Jasper acknowledged his presence with a brief glance, but never broke his concentration on that distant point in the forest. Tom studied the area carefully, noting the way the morning light filtered through the canopy and illuminated what appeared to be an old game trail that he had never noticed before, despite having lived on the property for over 15 years. Following his instincts and the dog's unwavering gaze, Tom decided to explore beyond the fence line for the first time since Jasper's arrival. The forest was dense and challenging to navigate, with fallen logs and thick undergrowth creating natural barriers that required careful maneuvering. Jasper followed closely, his behavior shifting dramatically once they entered the woods. His ears became alert, his nose worked constantly, and his entire body language suggested intense anticipation mixed with something that looked remarkably like anxiety or fear. They followed the barely visible trail for nearly 30 minutes, climbing steadily upward through increasingly challenging terrain. What they discovered at the end of that trail would haunt Tom Henderson for the rest of his life and provide answers. Two questions that no one in Millbrook had dared to ask. Hidden in a small clearing, camouflaged by years of natural growth and deliberately concealed from casual observation, was a makeshift campsite that had clearly been abandoned in haste. Scattered camping equipment, personal belongings, and most disturbing of all items that clearly belonged to the missing Clearwater family, created a scene that told a story of terror and desperate flight. Emma's distinctive purple backpack hung from a tree branch. Daniel's hiking boots were positioned next to a cold fire pit, and Rebecca's jewelry lay scattered in the dirt, as if dropped during a frantic escape. But the campsite held more secrets than just evidence of the Clearwater family's presence. Hidden beneath a tarp weighted down with rocks, Tom discovered a collection of photographs that revealed the true horror of what had transpired in this remote location. The images, clearly taken by Daniel Clearwater, documented illegal hunting activities, including the slaughter of protected wildlife species and evidence of a sophisticated poaching operation that involved several individuals, whose faces were clearly visible in the photographs. These weren't casual hunters taking a deer out of season. This was organized crime involving rare and protected species, with evidence of a black market operation worth potentially millions of dollars. The photographs told a story that made Tom's blood run cold. Daniel Clearwater, while pursuing his wildlife photography in this remote area, had apparently stumbled upon this illegal operation and, being the dedicated photographer he was, had documented everything he witnessed. The final photographs in the sequence showed Daniel's discovery by the poachers, and the images became increasingly frantic and poorly composed, suggesting he was taking them while fleeing for his life. The last photograph in the collection was a blurry image of several men pursuing Daniel through the forest, their faces twisted with murderous intent and their weapons clearly visible. Understanding now that the Clearwater family had likely been murdered by the poachers to protect their illegal operation, Tom felt a chill of fear as he realized that his own discovery of this evidence put him in mortal danger. The poaching operation was clearly ongoing, and if the criminals learned that their secret had been uncovered again, they would undoubtedly take the same violent action they had taken against the Clearwater family. Jasper seemed to sense the danger as well, his behavior becoming increasingly agitated as they examined the abandoned campsite, his ears constantly swiveling and his body language suggesting they were not alone in the forest. Tom's hands shook as he gathered the photographic evidence, knowing that he needed to get this information to Sheriff Kane immediately, but also understanding that every moment they remained in this location increased their risk of discovery by the dangerous criminals who had already demonstrated their willingness to kill to protect their operation. The fact that Jasper had led him to this location suggested that the dog had been present during the Clearwater family's final moments and had somehow escaped the violence that claimed his human family. The animal's daily vigil at the fence had been his desperate attempt to communicate the location of evidence that could bring justice for his murdered family. As they prepared to leave the campsite, Tom heard the distant sound of voices approaching through the forest, and his worst fears were realized. The poachers were returning to their base of operations, grabbing the photographic evidence and signaling for Jasper to follow. Tom began a desperate flight through the dense forest, trying to reach the safety of his property before the criminals discovered their presence. The chase that followed was a terrifying game of cat and mouse through treacherous terrain, with Tom's knowledge of the local landscape being his only advantage against pursuers, who were clearly experienced in forest navigation and had no qualms about using violence to protect their secrets. Jasper proved to be an invaluable ally during their escape, his animal instincts guiding them along paths that avoided the most dangerous areas and his acute hearing providing early warning of their pursuers' locations. The dog seemed to understand that they were fighting for their lives, and his behavior demonstrated a level of intelligence and loyalty that transcended typical animal behavior. Together, they navigated through increasingly challenging terrain, using every available piece of cover to avoid detection, while making their way back toward the safety of Tom's ranch. the sound of gunshots echoing through the forest confirmed that their pursuers had discovered the disturbed campsite and realized that their secret was no longer safe. Tom could hear the voices of multiple men coordinating their search, and the systematic way they were combing the forest suggested they were experienced hunters who understood how to track prey through difficult terrain. The only thing working in Tom's favor was his intimate knowledge of this particular area and Jasper's supernatural ability to navigate through the wilderness without making any noise that might give away their position. When they finally reached the fence line that marked the boundary of Tom's property, he felt a brief moment of relief, but he knew the danger was far from over. The poachers would undoubtedly continue their pursuit, and his remote ranch house would provide little protection against determined criminals who had already committed murder to protect their operation. Tom's priority was getting the photographic evidence to Sheriff Kane, but first he needed to ensure his own survival long enough to make that happen. The nearest neighbor was 5 miles away, and the main road was even farther, making escape on foot extremely dangerous. Tom's pickup truck was parked near the barn, but reaching it would require crossing open ground where he would be visible to anyone approaching from the forest. Making a desperate decision, he instructed Jasper to wait by the fence while he made a sprint for the vehicle, hoping that the dog's presence at his usual post might help maintain the illusion that nothing had changed. The run to the truck felt like the longest 30 seconds of Tom's life, and he expected at any moment to hear gunshots or see armed men emerging from the tree line. The engine started immediately, and Tom felt a surge of hope as he drove to Jasper's position at the fence. The dog jumped into the truck bed without hesitation, as if he understood that their survival depended on getting away from the ranch as quickly as possible. As they drove down the dirt road toward the main highway, Tom could see figures emerging from the forest behind them, confirming that their pursuers had reached his property and discovered their escape. The drive to Sheriff Kane's office in Millbrook felt surreal, with the peaceful Montana countryside providing a stark contrast to the life-and-death drama they had just experienced. Tom's hands were still shaking as he parked in front of the small building that housed the county sheriff's department, and Jasper remained alert and nervous, his behavior suggesting that he understood they were still in danger despite having reached what should have been safety. Sheriff Kane's reaction to Tom's story and the photographic evidence was immediate and decisive. Within minutes, he had called for backup from the state police and begun coordinating a raid on the poaching operations base camp. The photographs provided clear evidence of federal crimes involving protected wildlife species, and the case would quickly escalate to involve multiple law enforcement agencies. Kane also arranged for protective custody for Tom, understanding that the rancher's life was in immediate danger from criminals who had already demonstrated their willingness to kill witnesses. The raid on the poaching operation took place just after dawn the following day, with heavily armed law enforcement officers surrounding the campsite and capturing 3 men who were in the process of processing illegal wildlife products. The criminals' arrest led to the discovery of additional evidence, including records of black market sales and connections to organized crime networks operating across multiple states. More importantly for the community of Millbrook, the arrests also led to the discovery of the Clearwater family's remains, buried in a shallow grave approximately 1 mile from their original campsite. The recovery of the Clearwater family's bodies provided closure for a community that had been haunted by their disappearance, but it also confirmed the horrible truth that Jasper had been trying to communicate through his daily vigil at the fence. The dog had witnessed the murder of his human family and had spent months attempting to guide someone to the evidence that would bring their killers to justice. His unwavering loyalty and intelligence had ultimately solved a case that had baffled law enforcement and provided peace for a community that had lived in fear and uncertainty for months. In the weeks that followed, Jasper's behavior returned to something approaching normal dog behavior, though he retained an intelligence and awareness that seemed almost supernatural. Tom officially adopted the heroic canine, understanding that they had formed a bond forged in shared danger and mutual respect. The dog never again assumed his position at the fence, his mission finally complete and his family's killers brought to justice. The trial of the poachers drew national attention, with the case highlighting the ongoing problem of illegal wildlife trafficking and the danger faced by innocent people who accidentally discover such operations. The defendants received lengthy prison sentences for multiple federal crimes, including murder, conspiracy, and violations of wildlife protection laws. Daniel Clearwater's photographs served as the primary evidence in the case, his final act of courage ultimately bringing down the criminal organization that had destroyed his family. For Tom Henderson, the experience fundamentally changed his perspective on the relationship between humans and animals, and Jasper's extraordinary behavior had demonstrated levels of loyalty, intelligence, and communication that challenged everything he thought he knew about canine capabilities. The rancher became an advocate for animal intelligence research and frequently spoke about his experience to groups interested in the special bond between humans and their animal companions. Jasper lived out his remaining years on the Henderson ranch, treated as both a beloved pet and a respected member of the family. He never displayed the same intense focus and determination that had characterized his behavior during those crucial months, but he retained an alertness and intelligence that suggested he understood the importance of what they had accomplished together. The dog's legacy extended far beyond his role in solving the Clearwater case, inspiring research into animal communication and the remarkable bonds that can form between species when faced with extraordinary circumstances. The story of Jasper's daily vigil at the fence became part of Millbrook's local folklore, a tale that residents would tell visitors about the remarkable dog who solved a murder case through sheer determination and unwavering loyalty to his departed human family. The fence itself became an unofficial memorial to the Clearwater family and a reminder of the extraordinary events that had unfolded in their quiet Montana community. Years later, when Tom would look out his kitchen window each morning while sipping his coffee, he would remember those months when Jasper stood sentinel at the fence, patiently waiting for someone to understand his silent message. The memory served as a daily reminder of the incredible bond between humans and animals, and the remarkable things that can be accomplished when that bond is built on mutual trust, respect, and love. The investigation that followed revealed even more disturbing details about the criminal organization that had operated in the Montana wilderness for nearly 3 years. Federal agents discovered that the poaching ring had connections to international wildlife trafficking networks, with rare species being shipped to collectors across the globe through a sophisticated smuggling operation that used legitimate hunting lodges as cover. The Clearwater family had unknowingly stumbled upon just one small piece of a much larger criminal enterprise that generated millions of dollars annually through the illegal sale of endangered animals and their parts. During the extensive investigation, forensic experts analyzed every photograph Daniel Clearwater had taken, revealing details that helped law enforcement agencies in multiple states identify and arrest additional members of the criminal network. The wildlife photographer's final act of courage had inadvertently exposed an operation that extended far beyond the forests of Montana, reaching into urban markets where wealthy collectors paid enormous sums for illegal specimens and trophies taken from protected species. Sheriff Kane worked closely with federal wildlife enforcement agents to piece together the full scope of the criminal operation, discovering that the poachers had been using the remote Montana location as a processing center where they prepared illegal wildlife products for shipment to buyers around the world. The sophisticated nature of their operation included refrigerated storage facilities, professional butchering equipment, and communication systems that allowed them to coordinate with criminal contacts across multiple time zones. The trial revealed that Daniel Clearwater had actually been tracking the poachers for several days before his family's disappearance. Having initially discovered evidence of their activities during a routine photography expedition, his professional instincts as a wildlife photographer had led him to document everything he witnessed. But his dedication to capturing evidence had ultimately sealed his family's fate when the criminals realized they were being observed and photographed. Rebecca Clearwater's final moments, as reconstructed by investigators using evidence found at the campsite, showed that she had attempted to hide with Emma while Daniel created a diversion by leading the poachers away from their location. Her courage in trying to protect their daughter demonstrated the same kind of selfless bravery that her husband had shown in documenting the criminal activity. But the poachers had ultimately tracked down and killed all 3 family members to eliminate any potential witnesses to their illegal operation. The discovery of Emma's diary at the campsite provided heartbreaking insights into the family's final days, revealing that the 8-year-old had been aware something was wrong, but had trusted her parents to keep her safe. Her innocent observations about the bad men in the forest, and her descriptions of Jasper's increasingly agitated behavior painted a picture of a child who sensed danger, but couldn't fully comprehend the magnitude of the threat facing her family. Jasper's survival had been nothing short of miraculous, with investigators determining that the dog had escaped during the initial attack by following Daniel's instructions to run and hide. The intelligent animal had remained in the forest for several days after his family's murder, apparently trying to understand what had happened and searching for any sign of their survival. When he finally made his way to Tom Henderson's ranch, he was malnourished and traumatized, but his determination to communicate the location of evidence against his family's killers had driven him to maintain his daily vigil at the fence. Animal behaviorists who studied Jasper's case were amazed by the level of cognitive function and emotional intelligence the dog had demonstrated throughout the ordeal. His ability to associate the specific location where evidence could be found with the need to guide humans to that spot suggested a level of understanding and problem-solving capability that challenged existing theories about canine intelligence and communication abilities. The case also revealed disturbing information about how the poaching operation had influenced local wildlife populations. with several species showing signs of significant population decline in the areas where the criminals had been most active. Environmental scientists working with law enforcement agencies documented extensive ecological damage caused by the illegal hunting activities, including disruption of migration patterns and breeding cycles that would take years to restore to natural balance. Tom Henderson found himself thrust into the national spotlight as the case gained media attention, with reporters and documentary filmmakers seeking to tell the story of how a loyal dog had solved a complex criminal case through sheer determination and unwavering devotion to his murdered family. The rancher struggled with the attention, preferring his quiet life in rural Montana, but he understood the importance of sharing Jasper's story as a testament to the remarkable bond between humans and animals. The psychological impact of the experience continued to affect Tom long after the immediate danger had passed, with the rancher developing a deeper appreciation for the complex emotional lives of animals and their capacity for loyalty, grief, and determination. He began working with local animal welfare organizations to promote better understanding of animal intelligence and to support research into the communication abilities of domestic animals. Jasper's integration into life on the Henderson Ranch. It was gradual but ultimately successful, with the dog slowly learning to trust again and to engage in normal canine behaviors like playing, exploring, and socializing with other animals on the property. However, he retained certain behavioral quirks that seemed related to his traumatic experience, including an intense alertness to unusual sounds in the forest and a tendency to position himself where he could monitor potential escape routes from any location. The memorial service held for the Clearwater family drew hundreds of attendees from across Montana and neighboring states, with Jasper sitting quietly beside Tom Henderson throughout the ceremony as if he understood the significance of the occasion. The dog's presence provided comfort to community members who had been haunted by the family's disappearance, and his role in bringing their killers to justice gave deeper meaning to the tragic loss of 3 innocent lives. Federal prosecutors used Daniel Clearwater's photographs as the cornerstone of their case against the poaching network, with the images providing irrefutable evidence of criminal activity that resulted in convictions and lengthy prison sentences. For all involved parties, the photographer's dedication to documenting the truth had ultimately saved countless wildlife species from further exploitation and had prevented other innocent people from stumbling into the same deadly situation that had claimed his family's lives. The impact of the case extended beyond the immediate criminal prosecutions, leading to increased funding for wildlife enforcement agencies and new legislation designed to combat international trafficking in endangered species. The Clearwater family's tragic sacrifice had inadvertently contributed to broader efforts to protect wildlife populations and to strengthen the legal framework for prosecuting those who profit from the illegal exploitation of natural resources. As the years passed, Jasper became something of a local celebrity in Millbrook, with visitors often stopping by the Henderson Ranch hoping to meet the famous dog who had solved the murder case. Tom was selective about these visits, protecting Jasper's privacy while occasionally allowing animal behavior researchers and law enforcement trainers to observe and learn from the remarkable canine's story. The bond between Tom and Jasper deepened over time, with the rancher coming to understand that the dog's extraordinary behavior had been driven not just by loyalty to his deceased family, but by an innate sense of justice and a need to ensure that their deaths had meaning. The animal's persistence in communicating the location of crucial evidence demonstrated a level of moral understanding that challenged traditional assumptions about the emotional and cognitive capabilities of domestic animals. Educational institutions began incorporating Jasper's story into their curricula as an example of animal intelligence and the importance of paying attention to nonverbal communication from animals who might be trying to convey important information. The case became a landmark example of how the bond between humans and animals could lead to extraordinary outcomes when that relationship was built on mutual respect and understanding. The morning mist still clung to the rolling hills of Montana, but now it held different memories, not of mystery and danger, but of justice served, loyal hearts finally at peace, and the enduring power of love to transcend even the most tragic circumstances. Jasper's daily vigil at the fence had ended, but his legacy continued to inspire people around the world who heard his remarkable story of courage, loyalty, and the unbreakable bond between a faithful dog and the family he refused to let be forgotten.